Hi everyone, and welcome to TLDR Week 11, Security Policy, Governance, and Compliance. The learning outcomes this week, I want you to be able to talk about the concept of privacy, including personally private information. I want you to be able to talk about how attackers can get information by interacting with databases, how to set backup policies and password refresh policies. I want you to be able to talk about breach disclosure policies and consequences of data retention policies. So when we talk about privacy and computers, this is actually something that is, as of right now, and has been for a little while, a surprisingly controversial topic. Now, there's a number of businesses right now that actually their entire business model is saving data on consumers. So there's something called data warehouses, and what these data warehouses will do is their entire purpose and business model is collecting massive amounts of data on people and then selling it. Now, these are going to be saved in either databases or sometimes they will use big data and work with it in what's called shards. One of the sort of interesting things that's happened is a lot of people have started sharing a surprising amount of data, especially on social media. There are going to obviously be some people that are less comfortable with this, but one of the things that you'll notice if you go on social media at all ever is a lot of people are very happy to share where they go every day with check-ins, what they are doing, thinking about and eating with pictures, status updates, vague booking, all of those different things. And this is actually people completely volunteering all of this free information beyond what companies are able to access. Now, in Massachusetts, we do actually have some data privacy laws. I have listed some of these data privacy laws. If you would like a little more information about them, I have included a link at the bottom so that if this ends up getting updated at all, you can find the most up-to-date information. The privacy laws basically are going to talk about what is personal information, as in what are the rules that make it personal information, how it's collected, and what you can do with it. Now, this is actually specifically for Massachusetts residents. One of the things that the United States has, in my opinion, not done a great job of is make it so that there are federal data laws rather than state-by-state data laws. So in the EU, they've actually done something called GDPR, which is data privacy laws for all EU subjects. And we don't really have that same kind of thing here in the States. Now, there are some organizations that will go about and protect privacy. One of the more well-known ones is the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Now, what I'm going to have everybody do is go to privacytools.io and pick something to read about. Normally I'd have you share with the class, but instead just talk to somebody in your real life or on the private Discord and share about what you read. Just pick one thing, say what it was, why it was interesting, and if you're going to do anything with the information. Feel free to pause me here while you do that. Databases. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting about data that's being collected and databases is the amount of information that you can glean when you start combining sources. So if you have, for example, somebody's IP address, you can probably guess what area of the country they're in. However, if you combine that IP address with something like which operating system they're using, you can actually narrow it down quite a bit more. Let's say we combine the IP address where they are in the country to the operating system that they're using, and then we add in the browser that they're using, including the updates that it's at. That's one of the ways that we can sort of narrow in who somebody is using these data sources. And we can actually get a relatively clear picture using multiple data sources and multiple databases. The big question is, who gets access to this data, who is in control of these databases, and what can be done with this data. And that's actually sort of a current debate that's happening now, is who owns this data. Now, some of the more well-known data breaches are going to be Yahoo, Equifax, and TJ Maxx. Now, more are coming. There are tons that happen all the time. There are certainly going to be more recent ones. These were just well-known because of the size. The reason these were so well-known because of the size is the amount of people that were affected. Now, there is a comic to the right with the Ashley Madison breach that had a separate issue. That wasn't so much the amount of people that were affected by the breach, so much as what it said about the people that were affected and how that affected their personal lives, which is kind of different than the other breaches. I would make the argument that Equifax was a more serious breach considering how much we actually use credit systems for in this country. Data backup policies. Now, when we talk about data backups, we have to think about what is being backed up, what medium are we backing it up on, tape, hard drive, third party, cloud, whatever. Where is it going to be stored? How frequently are we doing this? What I always say about backups is you want to back up your data and think about your backups in terms of how much are you willing to lose. If you are willing to lose a day's worth of work, then back up once a day. If you're willing to lose a week, back up once a week. You want to think about treating your backup data the same as you treat your regular data. So if you have a database and it's encrypted, you also need to encrypt the backup of the database. It's really important that you have written policies and regulations in regards to all of your data backup policies. You never want to say, oh, we have an understanding, oh, it's always been done this way. You don't want to have any points of failure like that. It's really important that you have a policy, you have a set of rules, and then you follow that. And at least once a year, you want to go about checking, are you following these rules? Are the backups working? Have you backed up everything you want? Is anything missing? The worst thing that you can do is have either no backup or dead backups because they're basically the same thing. If you would like a horrifying story of backups, let me tell you about my wedding photos. Spoiler, I have none. So you want to make sure that you are really careful about your backups. Data retention is how long you are keeping your data. Do you have any legal obligations? And is there anything you shouldn't retain? So let's say we're a company and we have a database of customers. How long do you keep somebody in your database? What is your policy for how somebody can be removed from the database? What is your policy in terms of how they're removed? Do you remove all information? Do you remove just some of it? What is your written policy there? And is there anything that you have to keep? Like, for example, tax stuff in the US, you generally keep for 7 years. So if you have anything tax and accounting related, you probably need to keep it for 7 years. Some companies will also have legal obligations. An example that I always use is email. If you have email, you have to have a written policy of how long you keep emails. And the reason that you need this written policy is you need to make sure that it is across the board what's done. So if you have a policy to delete all emails after 6 months, you have to make sure that you actually delete them. Because otherwise, if you are, worst case scenario, called into a court, and somebody says, do you have these emails? And you say, no, then you can explain, no, because I delete them after 6 months, not, no, I don't have them, gee, I don't know where they are. Nobody is going to appreciate that. Breaches. Now, data breaches, is when a company has lost data and somebody has attacked them or they've accidentally slipped or whatever. Basically, everybody right now is a bad example. Unfortunately, as of August 2020, I haven't seen any good examples of data breaches, as in the company did everything that they were supposed to do across the board. I have a PDF in Blackboard about data breaches, and that's also going to be the lab for the week. But basically, there are examples of bad data breaches all over the place. Best practices are relatively simplistic to talk about. They're going to include things like making sure you notify your customers, do mitigation strategies, try to figure out exactly what was stolen, when it was stolen, things like that. When we talk about breaches, we can have insider threats and outsider threats. So let's say we have Acme Corporation. An outsider threat is somebody that wants to steal the database for Acme Corporation. An insider threat would be somebody who works for Acme Corporation would like to sell the database. Now, the lab that you're going to do for the week is a breach analysis. And basically, what's going to happen is you're going to pick a breach that happened in the last couple of years and write up how they did compared to best practices. I have examples of best practices. You can also find your own if you would like to find your own. Just check with me first. Make sure you include why you've chosen the company and evidence of how they have followed or not followed best practices. So you're going to want to make sure you include things like screenshots, press releases, interviews, articles, so that you have some proof of why you think they did or did not do a good job. Please let me know if you have any questions.